The air at the last turkey ranch smelled like sage, sweat, and turkey feathers, equal parts soothing and suffocating. On the sun-baked lawn, a line of mismatched yoga mats stretched across the dust, each one occupied by someone or something doing their best impression of flexibility. Riley Grange, wobbling on one foot, wasn't doing a great job of it. His arms flailed like mismatched windmills, his foot skidding in the dirt. Around him, chaos reigned. A wiry turkey-human hybrid with feathered arms toppled sideways, his squawk of alarm echoing as he took two others down in a tangle of limbs. Nearby, a smug turkey strutted onto someone's mat, issued a judgmental gobble, and flapped away like it had better places to be. "Channel the strength of the flock!" bellowed Marcy, the yoga instructor, her turkey feather headdress slipping slightly as she clapped her glittery combat boots together with authority.
"Pretty sure the flock's already asleep,"
Riley muttered under his breath, wobbling like a one-legged flamingo as his hybrid feathers ruffled in frustration. "Embrace your wingspan, stretch like you're soaring," Marcy barked, clapping her hands like a drill sergeant. Riley sighed, letting his arms flop to his sides.
"I should have joined the table tennis squad,"
he said, loud enough for the hybrids nearby to snicker. To his left, a rogue turkey launched an assault on someone's shoelaces, its beady eyes gleaming with malicious glee. Another hybrid attempted downward dog but collapsed mid-pose, looking more like a defeated pretzel. Riley bit back a laugh and collapsed onto his mat, earning a disapproving squawk from Marcy. By the time yoga ended, mercifully with no major injuries, Riley shuffled toward the communal dining area, his legs aching and his patience thinner than a turkey feather. The yard was alive with the ranch's usual rhythm, a symphony of chaos that Riley couldn't quite decide if he loved or tolerated. The dining area was a patchwork of outdoor tables and mismatched chairs, each one a scavenged relic from a dozen yard sales. Above, garlands of felt turkeys and flickering Christmas lights swung lazily in the breeze. Riley collapsed into a creaky chair, its legs groaning louder than he felt, and surveyed the scene. To his right, the spinning squad pedaled furiously on a row of salvaged bikes. Their instructor, a hybrid with a mohawk of real turkey feathers, shouted motivational gems like, "Feel the burn! Turkeys don't quit!" Over by the turkey pens, Hank Malone crouched low, murmuring to a massive tom named Big Blue. The bird, with its ridiculously puffed chest and glint of ancient wisdom, watched Hank like it was calculating the meaning of life, or judging him for his lack of snacks. Rumor had it Big Blue was older than the ranch itself, though Riley wasn't convinced turkeys could live that long. Still, there was something unsettling about the way the bird stared, like it knew things Riley couldn't begin to guess at. Further down the yard, an eccentric tinkerer adjusted gears on a squeaky treadmill, its belt now coated in fresh hay. A younger hybrid waved a handful of grain at a turkey perched on the machine, but the bird refused to budge, its glare radiating the pure contempt of a gym-goer forced into cardio before coffee. Riley poked at a bowl of granola, an overly festive version laced with dried cranberries for seasonal flair, as snippets of conversation drifted from the next table. "It's been glowing again," someone whispered, their voice low but urgent. "Think it's a sign?" another asked, leaning in. Riley glanced up, catching fragments of the discussion. They were talking about the Roostkeeper, the ranch's not-so-secret secret. The golden-feathered turkey, revered like a saint by the older militia members, had become the ranch's unofficial mascot and greatest mystery. Riley had seen it exactly once, perched regally on a roost like it owned the place. Its feathers shimmered unnaturally, catching the light even in shadow, and its gaze was unsettling. To Riley it seemed like a smug chicken with a god complex. But even he couldn't deny there was something about it, a gravity, a glow, that hinted it might actually live up to its legend. If the hunters get their hands on it, one voice trailed off, heavy with implication. "Game over," another finished grimly. Riley shoved the granola aside, suddenly not hungry. The thought of the hunters circling closer made his stomach twist, not because he cared about the Roostkeeper's mythical status, but because the ranch's quirks, for all their madness, had started to feel like something worth protecting. As Riley wandered toward the barn, hoping to escape the whispers of doom, a firm hand caught his shoulder. Hank Malone loomed over him, his weathered face creased with concern. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Got a minute?"
Not really.
Riley quipped, though his heart sank. He already knew where this was going. Hank led him to the edge of the property, where a group of militia members stood in a tense huddle. Beyond them, the horizon stretched toward Cheaha State Park, its dense woods deceptively calm in the fading light. "We've had scouts spotting hunters near the park," Hank said, his gravelly voice low and deliberate. "Lyle Harrow's crew. Trucks, shiny suits, the whole 9 yards." Riley frowned.
Maybe they're just passing through.
Hank's eyes narrowed, his tone sharpening like the edge of a blade. "They're not just passing through, they're circling. And if we're not careful, they'll leave us featherless and gutted." The weight of his words settled over Riley like a stone. The ranch, for all its chaos and quirks, wasn't just a refuge. It was home. And now, it was in danger. The camera panned across a laboratory so sterile it felt hostile. Walls of polished white gleamed under harsh fluorescent light, while rows of holographic turkeys spun slowly in the air, their pixelated feathers shimmering unnervingly. Lyle Harrow stood in the center of it all, his sharp suit spotless, his hair a sculpted monument to ambition. He grinned like a man with a secret and a monopoly. "Thanksgiving is a time for tradition," he began, his voice smooth and cutting. "But traditions, like all things, evolve." He gestured grandly, the holographic turkeys dissolving into golden drumsticks that gleamed like treasure. "That's why I'm proud to introduce Harvest Prime, the future of Thanksgiving." Behind him, bold glowing letters flared to life, casting a faintly ominous glow across the room. "A sustainable lab-grown turkey product that will revolutionize the way we celebrate." Polite applause rippled through the audience. A mix of reporters, investors, and a few local officials shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. But Lyle continued, raising a hand to silence the room. "There's one missing ingredient, a piece of history, a symbol of greatness." He turned, and the holograms shifted again, forming the unmistakable image of a golden-feathered turkey. Its beady eyes glinted with a disconcerting intelligence. "The Roostkeeper," Lyle said, his tone reverent yet calculating. "The key to unlocking the next chapter in culinary evolution, and the key to ensuring Harvest Prime's place in history." The room fell silent, the faint hum of the holograms the only sound. Lyle stepped closer to the camera, his smile sharpening. "We know where it is, and we're coming to get it." The broadcast cut to the Harvest Prime logo, accompanied by an unsettling synthesized gobble. The barn felt colder than usual as the television clicked off, its hum replaced by tense silence. Dust swirled in the golden beam of sunlight cutting through the warped barn door. Hank Malone stood at the head of the table, his gnarled hands pressed flat against a dusty blueprint of the ranch. Around him, the militia sat in mismatched chairs, their punk-inspired outfits clashing with the grim atmosphere. "They know," Hank said, his gravelly voice breaking the silence, "and they're coming for us."
What does that even mean, Hank?
Riley blurted, slouched in a corner chair. His feathers bristled as his voice climbed.
Coming for us? It's a bird. A bird. Maybe we just let it go.
The room erupted into gasps. A hybrid with feathered arms nearly dropped his mug of licorice tea, while another clutched her table tennis paddle like a weapon. Hank's eyes snapped to Riley, sharp as a hawk's. "Let it go? You don't just let go of the future, Riley." He jabbed a finger at the blueprint. "That bird is more than a turkey. It's history. It's survival. It's ours. Riley leaned back, his arms crossed.
It's also a death sentence if we're not careful. Look, I'm just saying, maybe we shouldn't risk everything for some shiny poultry.
It's not just poultry, the hybrid with the paddle snapped. That's the Roostkeeper. The room exploded into arguments, voices overlapping as the militia splintered into factions. Hank slammed his fist on the table, rattling the blueprint. Enough! His voice cut through the noise. This isn't just about a bird, it's about what this place stands for. If we don't fight for it, we might as well hand over the ranch and walk away. That night, Riley wandered through the ranch, his thoughts heavy. Crickets hummed in the background, punctuated by the occasional rustle of feathers from the turkey pens. He stopped in front of the Roostkeeper's enclosure. The golden feathered bird stood perched on a roost, its feathers catching the moonlight and refracting it in a way that seemed almost alive.
Why are you so special?
The bird tilted its head, its gaze meeting his. For a moment, Riley swore he saw something there, something ancient and knowing, a silent challenge. He exhaled, the knot in his chest tightening. Maybe Hank was right. Maybe this wasn't just about a bird. The barn buzzed with energy, its usual charm replaced by an undercurrent of tension and the unmistakable aroma of licorice tea mingling with turkey droppings. Hank Malone, his patched leather vest and feathered scarf, lending him the air of a battle-worn general, slammed a rolled-up map against a hay bale. "All right, listen up," he barked, his voice cutting through the din. "We've got maybe 2 days to turn this ranch into a fortress. Let's move." Around him, the militia, a motley crew of hybrids, eccentric locals, and a handful of determined turkeys, cheered. Well, most of them cheered. Riley leaned against the wall near the back, rubbing his temples and muttering.
Fortress of Insanity, maybe.
Marcy, the yoga squad's wiry instructor, was already rallying her group. She lunged dramatically onto a mat, her turkey feather headdress wobbling dangerously. "This is warrior turkey pose. Engage those glutes. Think like a bird. Be the bird." A hybrid with feathered arms collapsed, panting. "If I engage any harder, I'm going to need a new spine." "Pain is temporary," Marcy bellowed, her pose rock solid as the others wobbled like toddlers on roller skates. On the far side of the barn, the table tennis squad turned the dining table into a war zone. Rubber balls ricocheted off walls and heads, one bouncing off Riley's shoulder. "It's called strategy," a player shouted, deflecting another volley. "It's called you're useless in a fight," someone countered, dodging an errant paddle. Near the turkey pens, chaos reigned. A particularly irate bird stole a hybrid's boot and sprinted off, flapping triumphantly. Riley smirked as the hybrid gave chase, yelling, "I need that! It's my good foot!" Hank caught Riley's expression and crossed his arms. "Something funny about protecting your home, Grange?" Riley straightened, rolling his eyes.
Not at all, Hank. This is obviously the pinnacle of tactical brilliance. Table tennis and turkeys on treadmills. We're unstoppable.
The sun dipped low, casting streaks of molten gold across the ranch. Riley paced near the turkey pens, his thoughts circling like vultures. "You think this is a joke, don't you?" Hank's gravelly voice broke the quiet. Riley turned, his shoulders tense.
I think you're throwing everything we have into a fight we can't win. What's the point if we lose everything in the process?
Hank stepped closer, his face shadowed but stern. "This ranch doesn't break, Riley. It bends and it survives. Your mother believed that, and I do too." Riley's fists clenched.
You always bring her into this. She fought so we didn't have to, Hank. She fought for peace, not this.
Hank's expression softened, the weight of the years settling into his voice. "Maybe so, but she also believed in you, Riley. If you let that cynicism keep running the show, you won't just lose a fight, you'll lose everything she built, everything she fought to protect." Riley couldn't sleep. The air in the barn felt too heavy, too loud with unspoken fears. So he wandered into the woods, letting the stillness pull him away from the chaos. But the stillness was deceptive. A faint red glow caught his eye, drawing him to a tripod-mounted surveillance camera hidden among the pines. Riley crouched, his breath quickening as he fumbled with the wires. Well, well. The voice froze him. Riley turned slowly to see Lyle Harrow, his hands in his pockets, a predatory smile curling his lips. "Caught you sneaking around," Lyle said, his tone casual, like they were old friends.
"You're trespassing,"
Riley shot back, his voice steadier than he felt. Lyle chuckled, stepping closer. "And you're tampering with my equipment. Funny how life works." His gaze swept over Riley, calculating. "You're one of them, aren't you? A hybrid?" Riley's muscles tensed, but he stayed silent. "You've got potential, kid," Lyle said, his voice syrupy and sharp. "But your flock? They're sitting ducks. You don't belong with them, do you?" Riley gritted his teeth.
"You don't know anything about us."
Lyle leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Oh, I know plenty. And when Thanksgiving rolls around, I'll take more than just that bird. I'll take your whole legacy." A rustle in the trees pulled his attention, and without another word, Lyle vanished into the darkness. Riley sprinted back to the barn, breathless.
"They've got cameras everywhere, and Lyle, he's planning something big. Thanksgiving night, no question about it. He's coming for the Roostkeeper."
Hank's expression darkened, but a glimmer of pride gleamed in his eyes. "Good work, kid. Now let's get ready." Hank's expression darkened, but a glimmer of pride gleamed in his eyes. "Good work, kid. Now let's get ready." Riley nodded, the knot in his chest tightening. It was time to fight. The attic of the main barn was a disaster zone masquerading as a time capsule. Dusty beams sagged overhead, creaking ominously, while cobwebs fluttered like half-hearted streamers in the draft. Riley squinted at the dim glow of a single dangling bulb, wiping his sleeve across his face as he navigated the chaos. The space was a monument to bad storage habits. Broken spinning bikes leaned against crates of unidentifiable liquids labeled in shaky handwriting, anti-fox potion and coyote repellent light. Turkey feathers tied together with twine spilled out of burlap sacks like overstuffed pillows. At the back, something glinted beneath a precarious stack of feed bags. Riley tugged it free, a cracked leather ledger so old it practically coughed dust.
"What in the—"
Inside, the pages were filled with scrawled notes, diagrams, and strategies. The first sketch, a scarecrow-like decoy turkey with a crooked grin and beady eyes, made Riley snort. Arrows pointed to its features with labels like "guaranteed to infuriate" and "pure psychological warfare." Another page showed treadmills rigged to leave false trails, and a detailed schematic described the egg-cellent alarm system, designed to unleash banshee-like screeches when triggered. But the piece de resistance was a smoke machine fueled by sage and rosemary, its purpose listed as creating a spiritual fog of confusion. Riley raised an eyebrow.
They were either brilliant or completely out of their minds.
Still, as ridiculous as it all seemed, there was a spark of brilliance in the plans. Riley closed the ledger, fingers brushing its worn cover. These people, eccentric and wildly impractical, had believed they could fight back.
Maybe they weren't wrong.
Riley murmured, tucking the ledger under their arm and heading down the ladder. He burst into the barn's main room, the door slamming against the wall. Hank stood over a map of the ranch, his shoulders tense, a pencil gripped tightly between his teeth like a fuse ready to snap.
"Got something,"
Riley said, dropping the ledger onto the table with a satisfying thud. Hank frowned, flipping it open. His bushy eyebrows climbed higher and higher with each page. "These old-timers were crazier than I am," he muttered, a grin tugging at his lips.
"Maybe.
Riley said, pointing to a sketch of the treadmill traps.
But some of it might actually work. We've got the equipment. Why not use it to trip up the hunters instead of us?"
Hank chuckled. I'd pay good money to see Lyle Harrow faceplant on a spinning bike. Riley tapped the excellent alarm system.
This could give us an edge at night. And the smoke machine? Confusion works both ways.
Hank studied Riley for a moment, then nodded. All right, kid. Let's show those hunters what crazy really looks like. Rallying the troops. At the next militia meeting, Riley laid out the plans, using the ledger's diagrams and a hand-drawn map. Excitement rippled through the group, replacing the tension that had hung over them for days. The yoga team immediately saw potential. Balance beams became spring-loaded tripwires, which Marcy declared a perfect union of mindfulness and destruction. The table tennis squad rigged their paddles with spring-loaded launchers. One hybrid insisted on painting his paddle with flames and the words "Justice Wing." Even the turkeys got involved. A few were fitted with glowing decoy devices, waddling distractions designed to lure hunters into traps. Captain Cluck, a particularly sassy bird, strutted around with his glowing orb, clearly reveling in his newfound importance. Hank stood in the corner, arms crossed, a faint smile breaking through his usual gruffness. "This just might work," he muttered. Riley caught Hank's gaze and felt something unfamiliar. Pride? Maybe. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't feel like an outsider. The ranch buzzed with purpose as preparations surged ahead. The barn pulsed with energy, spinning bikes repurposed into a clattering conveyor system that rattled in rhythm with their efforts. Out in the yard, turkeys jogged through the dusk, glowing decoy devices strapped to their backs flickering like tiny constellations in motion. That evening, Riley settled onto the porch, the golden light of sunset spilling across the ranch. Chaos reigned in every corner. Marcy adjusting a spring-loaded tripwire, Captain Cluck chasing after an abandoned orb. But it wasn't just chaos anymore. It was effort, unity. A team, not just a collection of misfits. Hank appeared beside him, the steam from his mug curling like a ribbon in the cool air. He didn't sit, just leaned on the porch railing with that same steady presence Riley had come to rely on. "You did good, kid," Hank said, his voice quieter, softer than usual. But it carried weight, grounding the moment. Riley nodded, the faintest smile tugging at his lips, rare but real. As the sun dipped below the horizon, something flickered inside him. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a shot. The last turkey ranch lay cloaked in a darkness that seemed to breathe, alive and watchful. The air hung heavy with sage and rosemary, the faint wind barely teasing the leaves. Every shadow felt sharper, every sound swallowed by the oppressive quiet. At the edge of the woods, Lyle Harrow crouched low, his once immaculate suit streaked with ash, his polished boots dulled to a grimy mat. Yet his posture exuded the same unshakable confidence. Behind him, his hunters held their breath, tranquilizer guns gleaming faintly under the cold starlight. "Stay sharp," Lyle murmured, his grin a razor's edge. "No feathers out of place. That bird's coming back with us." With a single hand gesture, he signaled the advance. The group moved like shadows themselves, silent, methodical, blending into the surrounding gloom. The ranch loomed ahead, its cobbled-together defenses jagged and foreboding. But something wasn't right. As they crossed the threshold, unease seeped through the ranks. The ranch was unnervingly still. Too still. No distant gobbles. No hum of makeshift contraptions. Just silence so deep it pressed against their ears like cotton. One of the hunters faltered, glancing nervously at Lyle. "Feels like a trap," he muttered under his breath. Lyle didn't even look back. "Good," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "It means they're paying attention." The first trap sprung with a sputtering clunk. A decoy turkey lurched into view, its crooked grin glowing faintly from a flickering LED stuffed into its hollow head. "What the hell is that?" A hunter started, stepping closer. The ground answered. The treadmill beneath him roared to life, throwing him backward into a stack of barrels. The barrels erupted in a spectacular explosion of licorice tea leaves, filling the air with a scent both soothing and suffocating. "Decoy!" another hunter barked, only to feel his boot crunch against something soft. The excellent alarm system shrieked in reply, a piercing, otherworldly wail that echoed across the ranch. The hunters recoiled, clutching their ears as the sound rattled the very air around them. And then, from the haze of tea leaves and chaos, they appeared. The turkey militia emerged like something out of a neon-drenched fever dream, draped in patchwork armor, fluorescent scarves, and masks adorned with real turkey feathers. They moved with an absurd yet undeniable swagger. At the front, Marcy wielded a yoga mat like a medieval standard, charging a hunter with a ferocity that turned warrior pose into a weapon. She lunged, knocking the tranquilizer gun from his hands with a single fluid motion. The sage and rosemary smoke machine roared, belching thick clouds of fragrant fog that turned the beams of the hunter's flashlights into twisting, ghostly spirals. Shapes shifted in the haze, turkeys, humans, hybrids, all blurring together into a hallucinatory nightmare. "This place is cursed," one hunter muttered, edging backward. He didn't get far. A single misstep sent him careening over a balance beam tripwire. He landed squarely in a confetti bomb trap which erupted with an explosion of glitter and paper stars. The ranch had become a battlefield, surreal and unforgiving. And the turkey militia? They were just getting started. Amid the chaos, Riley's gaze locked onto the Roostkeeper, its golden cage glinting faintly through the swirling fog. Even battered and caged, the bird's feathers shimmered, radiating defiance. Two hunters hoisted the cage onto a wagon, their movements hurried but methodical. Riley's heart slammed against his ribs. "No," he murmured, his hybrid feathers bristling like static charged quills. He sprang into action, cutting through the chaos with hybrid speed, his every step sharp and deliberate. He vaulted onto the wagon, his taloned fingers catching the edge of a mounted spinning bike. "Hey!" one hunter barked, but before he could react, Riley's foot slammed the pedals into motion. The chain snapped out, striking the tranquilizer gun from the hunter's grasp. The second hunter lunged, but Riley ducked low, his reflexes razor sharp. Gripping the spinning bike's frame, he swung it in a wide arc, the wheels spinning like a weaponized blur. The hunter staggered backward, tripping into a hay bale with a muffled thud. From the smoke, Lyle emerged, his steps unhurried and his grin razor-thin. He surveyed the wreckage with a calculating gaze before locking eyes with Riley. "Impressive," Lyle drawled, though the glint of irritation in his eyes betrayed him. "But let's not kid ourselves. You're outnumbered, kid, and that bird, it's as good as mine." Riley tightened his grip on the cage, his breath coming in sharp bursts. The Roostkeeper's unblinking gaze met his, and for a moment, the world stilled.
"Not yet,"
Riley said, his voice low but unshakable. The Roostkeeper tilted its head, releasing a resonant gobble that seemed to ripple through the air like a stone dropped in water. The sound was unearthly, reverberating deep in the chest, a low, thunderous hum that froze every soul in its tracks. From the shadows, turkeys emerged. Captain Cluck led the charge, his glowing decoy strapped proudly to his back like a beacon. One by one, the flock surged forward, their claws scratching, beaks snapping, wings battering the ground in a cacophony of chaos. It wasn't a charge. It was an avalanche of feathers, eyes blazing with singular purpose. "What the?" Lyle managed, his confident smirk twisting into wide-eyed disbelief. His words were swallowed whole as the stampede descended, a living wave of fury and feathers. Beaks jabbed at his legs, claws raked at his pristine suit. Hunters stumbled backwards, slipping in the melee, their tranquilizer guns ripped away by snapping beaks. Captain Cluck sprang forward, a squawking blur, and landed squarely on Lyle's chest, wings beating furiously. Lyle's cry of frustration was lost in the cacophony. The tide of turkeys didn't relent. They weren't just defending, they were winning. As the last of the hunters disappeared into the woods, their panicked cries dissolving into the night, A heavy stillness settled over the ranch. The air hung thick with the scent of sage and smoke, and the remnants of battle lay scattered like forgotten relics, spent traps, broken decoys, and a confetti-streaked treadmill, leaning at an awkward angle. The militia, bruised and battered, stood in silence, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Smoke curled lazily into the night, the haze lifting to reveal the battlefield and their victory. Hank limped toward Riley, his steps uneven, but his grin as broad as ever. He clapped a hand on Riley's shoulder, his voice rough but proud. "We did it, kid." Riley shook his head, his gaze shifting to the Roostkeeper. Perched atop its battered cage, the golden feathered bird seemed to radiate an almost otherworldly calm. It puffed out its chest, its dark eyes surveying the ranch with the gravity of a ruler reclaiming a throne.
"No,"
Riley said, a rare smile tugging at his lips.
"that fella over there did it."
The Roostkeeper tilted its head, releasing a final gobble that echoed through the quiet night. The sound carried power, defiance, and just a hint of smug triumph. Somewhere in the woods, a defeated hunter's scream pierced the silence, followed by the rustle of retreating footsteps. The militia burst into weary laughter, their tension breaking at last. Riley glanced at Hank, his hybrid feathers ruffling in the faint breeze.
"Maybe."
Riley murmured,
"We really did have a chance after all."
The hunter's plan. The forest edge hummed with subdued energy, its shadows stretching long in the soft hues of dawn. Lyle Harrow stood as still as the trees around him, his sharp features unreadable. He watched the last turkey ranch, now quiet and battered, its mismatched defenses leaning like forgotten relics. The faintest smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Behind him, the hunters worked in silence, their makeshift camp bathed in the cold blue glow of LED floodlights. Trucks idled in tight formation, their engines rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. The earlier loss had stung, but tonight it would be a scar, not a defeat. Lyle's voice broke the quiet, calm, and edged with steel. "They think it's over. That's their mistake." Ward, his wiry second-in-command, stood by the hood of a truck where a holographic map of the ranch shimmered into view. Red markers blinked, signaling traps already dismantled. Green dots represented the pens, the barn, and the Roostkeeper's last known location. Lyle gestured toward the map, his grin as sharp as broken glass. "No showmanship this time, no distractions. Take out the stragglers, secure the bird, and for the love of God, don't screw this up." The hunters nodded, their faces grim with determination. From the back of the group, a tranquilizer gun fired with a soft thwick, and a dart embedded itself in a teammate's thigh. The unfortunate man collapsed in a heap, his groan breaking the tense atmosphere. Lyle froze, his shoulders stiffening. He turned slowly, his pale eyes narrowing as they landed on the culprit. "If you idiots pull that crap again," he said evenly, his tone a venomous whisper, "I'll personally feed you to the turkeys." He stepped over the tranquilized hunter without another glance, his focus locked on the ranch ahead. "Move out." The surprise attack. The hunters advanced through the woods with eerie precision. Drones buzzed overhead, their thermal sensors scanning the ranch yard. On the screens, faint outlines flickered, turkeys clustered in their pens, militia members resting in the barn. The heat signatures were still, vulnerable. "Perfect," Ward murmured, signaling to the team. One hunter crouched near the remnants of a treadmill trap, his gloved hands swiftly snipping wires. The mechanism gave a half-hearted whir before falling silent. "Too easy," another muttered, dismantling what was left of the egg-cellant alarm system. The battered contraption let out a weak hiss as its final defenses sputtered. They moved swiftly, dismantling decoy traps and clearing paths through the wreckage. A hunter paused by a confetti-streaked balance beam, chuckling softly. Looks like the turkey circus packed up early. As they reached the yard, the quiet grew unnatural, pressing against their ears like static. The Roostkeeper stood alone in the clearing, framed by the muted light of dawn. Its golden feathers shimmered faintly, dulled by the fight but no less regal. The bird didn't move, its unblinking eyes fixed on the approaching figures. Lyle strode into the clearing, his boots crunching over broken decoys and bits of tinsel. The corners of his mouth curled upward as he took in the sight before him. "It's magnificent," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced at his team, his expression unreadable. "Do you see it? The last of its kind, the living history of Thanksgiving?" One of the hunters coughed awkwardly. "Yeah, sure, a real treasure." Lyle's grin sharpened as he waved them forward. From the trees above, a steel cage descended with a metallic clang. The Roostkeeper didn't flinch as the bars surrounded it, its calm gaze unbroken. Lyle crouched beside the cage, brushing a speck of ash from his sleeve. "You fought valiantly, little king, but every reign has its end." The bird tilted its head slightly, its dark eyes locking with his. Then it let out a low, resonant gobble that seemed to carry through the air, heavy with a strange, mournful finality. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Did it just give up?" one muttered, shifting uncomfortably. Lyle straightened, brushing off his hands. "It knows when it's beaten." His grin returned, cold and triumphant. A pity its guardians don't have the same clarity. Inside the barn, the militia was oblivious. The scent of warm cider mingled with the remnants of smoke as they lounged in mismatched chairs, their laughter carrying through the rafters. "Here's to survival," Marcy toasted, raising a chipped mug. Captain Cluck strutted near the center of the group, his glowing decoy now dim but still attached. The turkeys, too, had settled, their feathers ruffling contentedly as they nestled in pens. Riley leaned back against the wall, a rare smile softening his features. The tension of the past days was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar sense of accomplishment. Hank, leaning heavily on a rake, caught Riley's eye. "You did good, kid," he said, his tone warm. Riley nodded, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. Dawn's first light painted the ranch in hues of gold and pink. "I think we all did." Outside, a faint hum filled the air, the sound of drones circling overhead. A shadow flickered through the open doorway, then disappeared. The celebration faltered. Riley straightened, his hybrid feathers bristling as unease crept over him. "Hank," he said slowly, his voice low, "do you hear that?" But before Hank could answer, the barn door exploded inward. Hunters poured into the yard, their movements synchronized and swift. Nets flew through the air and tranquilizer darts hissed as they found their marks. "Move," Riley shouted, grabbing a startled Marcy and pulling her behind an overturned table. The celebration erupted into chaos as the militia scrambled to respond. A smoke bomb detonated, shrouding the yard in choking plumes of rosemary and sage, but this time, the hunters were ready. They moved like shadows, dismantling defenses as quickly as they appeared. From the center of the clearing, the Roostkeeper watched silently, its golden cage now flanked by two armed hunters. Lyle stepped forward, his silhouette framed by the rising sun. His smile was a blade cutting through the chaos. "Round two," he called, his voice carrying over the noise. And this time, we played a win. The last turkey ranch was a battlefield of broken dreams. The once chaotic charm of its cobbled-together defenses had collapsed into a graveyard of overturned treadmills, tangled wires, and decoy turkeys strewn like fallen soldiers. Shattered tripwires glinted in the faint morning light, their edges jagged as if to mock their failure. Smoke from the sage and rosemary machine curled lazily in the air, twisting around splintered fences and punctuating the silence with an acrid sting. Lyle Harrow moved through the wreckage like a victor surveying his spoils. His suit sleeves were rolled up, the crisp fabric streaked with mud and feathers. The polished shine of his boots had dulled under the weight of the ranch's defeat, but the smirk on his face remained untarnished. The tranquilizer gun dangled loosely from his fingers, its presence casual yet threatening. "All right, boys," he barked, his voice sharp enough to carry through the stillness. He motioned toward the center of the yard with a flick of his wrist. "Let's wrap this up." There it was, the Roostkeeper. The golden-feathered bird stood alone in its cage, regal even amid the ruin. Smoke and dirt had dulled its sheen, yet its feathers shimmered faintly, a quiet defiance in its beauty. Surrounding the cage were blinking tracking devices and sleek, high-tech traps, a stark contrast to the ranch's patchwork creations. Lyle's grin widened. "Majestic, isn't it?" He muttered to no one in particular, his tone laced with smug satisfaction. With a snap of his fingers, a steel cage descended from a hidden pulley system. Its bars clanged into place around the Roostkeeper, sealing it inside with finality. The bird tilted its head, releasing a low, mournful gobble that rippled through the air like a funeral dirge. Even the hunters hesitated. The sound carried a weight, a quiet, resonant sorrow that seemed to press down on the yard. For a brief moment, no one moved. From the shadows, the turkey militia huddled in defeat. Marcy clutched her battered yoga mat like a lifeline, her hands trembling. Dirt streaked her pale face, the intricate designs of her war paint smeared into abstract swirls. Hank leaned heavily on a broken rake, his breath shallow, each exhale a testament to the toll of the fight. Captain Cluck's glowing decoy pulsed weakly, the dim light casting faint, erratic shadows across his feathers. Riley stood apart. Blood trickled down his cheek in a thin, jagged line, but he barely noticed. His hybrid feathers bristled involuntarily, his gaze fixed on the cage where the Roostkeeper now stood, its proud head bowed, its golden feathers muted by ash. He clenched his fists, his chest tightened with anger, but beneath it was something heavier. Failure. Lyle's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "You put up a good fight," he began, his tone warm with mockery. "Really, I'm impressed. Scrappy little team, mismatched defenses. But let's not kid ourselves." He gestured at the cage, his smirk deepening. "This bird, it's worth more than your entire dream of a ranch. Do you know why?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Because it's real. It's valuable. You're just misfits clinging to something that hasn't mattered in years." Marcy shifted uncomfortably, her knuckles whitening as she gripped her mat tighter. Hank's grip on the rake faltered, but he didn't let go. Riley stared at Lyle, his hybrid feathers trembling with the effort of staying still. Lyle took a step toward them, his grin turning razor sharp. "This is the future. And you?" He chuckled, the sound low and condescending. "You're the footnote, a relic of people too stubborn to move on." He glanced back at the hunters. "Get moving." 2 hunters hoisted the cage onto a reinforced wagon. The Roostkeeper released another soft gobble, but its defiance had dimmed. The clatter of wheels against stone filled the yard as the hunters began their retreat. Lyle turned for one last look at the militia. "Enjoy the quiet while it lasts," he said with a smirk before vanishing into the smoke. The yard was a battlefield of exhaustion, faces streaked with dirt, bodies bruised, but no one had fallen completely. Marcy paced, her fist clenched. How could we think we'd already won? Seriously, how? The hubris. Hank, leaning heavily on a rake, let out a low growl as he pushed himself upright. His movements were slow, but his eyes burned with a fierce light. "They think it's over," he said, his voice rough but steady. "They think we'll tuck our tails and run." He turned to Riley, the question unspoken but clear. "What now?" Riley hesitated, his gaze sweeping over the group, battered hybrids, determined guardians, and a scrappy flock of turkeys still ruffling their feathers in defiance. The weight of the night pressed against him, but his jaw said as he straightened his stance. The faint glow of dawn caught on his hybrid feathers, making them shimmer like embers in the ash.
They think they've won, but let's remind them whose ranch this is.
Marcy crossed her arms. "And the how?" she asked, holding up an unlit smoke pellet like it was a joke. "They've got tech, guns, trucks."
We've got the tunnels.
Riley said, the faintest grin curling at the edge of his lips. Heads turned, the group exchanging glances. The tunnels were a relic of the ranch's original turkey militia, stretching far beyond the property. Forgotten by most, but not by them.
They'll be celebrating, counting us out. That's when we hit them, hard. Every trap, every decoy, every bit of chaos this place has to offer.
He turned, his eyes locking onto Hank's.
We're not just fighting for the Roostkeeper. We're fighting for this ranch, for everything it stands for. And we're doing it together.
The group was silent for a beat, the weight of Riley's words settling over them like the first calm after a storm. Then Captain Cluck broke the silence with a defiant gobble, his glowing decoy flickering to life like a rallying cry. Marcy cracked a grin, the smoke pellet now rolling between her fingers. Hank gave a single nod, his approval subtle but resolute. One by one, the militia straightened, their exhaustion giving way to purpose.
Let's move.
As the group scattered to prepare, Riley lingered for a moment, staring at the horizon. The first streaks of light brushed against the battered ranch, a quiet promise of what they could still protect. This wasn't just about the Roostkeeper anymore. It was about holding the line, and this time, they wouldn't just fight, they'd win. The underground tunnels beneath the last turkey ranch exuded an eerie stillness. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint tang of soil and decay. Rough-hewn stone walls braced against roots that twisted like skeletal fingers, reaching into the void. Riley led the turkey militia in a tight, single file, a lantern swaying in his hand, its flickering light painting faint, shifting shapes on the walls. Behind him, Hank hobbled along, leaning heavily on Marcy, who bore his weight with quiet determination. Even Captain Cluck waddled in determined silence, his glowing decoy orb tucked snugly beneath his wing like a soldier bearing a medal of valor. "You sure these tunnels can handle this?" Marcy whispered, her voice bouncing eerily through the passage.
They've held for decades.
Riley replied, his tone steady, though the glow of the lantern caught the tension in his jaw.
Long enough to strike where it counts.
At a fork in the tunnels, Riley raised his hand, halting the group. The faint hum of truck engines and muffled voices filtered through the dirt ceiling above them. Riley's lips curled into a grin, his hybrid feathers bristling faintly.
They're right above us.
The ambush. The ground exploded in a symphony of chaos as the turkey militia burst through hidden trapdoors, a ferocious, avian-fueled resistance.
Move! Move!
Riley's voice rang out as he vaulted from the tunnel with the speed and precision of his hybrid instincts. His eyes locked on the hunter's supply truck, where the golden cage containing the Roostkeeper gleamed under harsh floodlights. Chaos ignited in the clearing. A spring-loaded balance beam trap snapped into action, launching a net over two unsuspecting hunters and pinning them to their own truck. Captain Cluck darted into the fray, his glowing orb bobbing behind him like a beacon. With impeccable timing, he led a group of hunters straight into a treadmill trap. The machines roared to life, sending the hunters tumbling into one another like bowling pins in a slapstick disaster. The sage and rosemary smoke machine wheezed into action, releasing fragrant clouds that twisted through the floodlights, obscuring the militia's movements and plunging the hunters into disarray. The turkeys charged en masse, gobbling like battle cries. Claws scratched, beaks pecked, and feathers flurried in a surreal, feathered wave of mayhem that overwhelmed even the most steadfast hunters. Through the chaos, Riley's sharp eyes caught sight of Lyle Harrow near the edge of the clearing. The man was frantic, attempting to load the Roostkeeper's cage onto his personal truck, sweat streaking his ash-smeared face.
Not so fast, Harrow,
Riley shouted, his voice slicing through the fog. Lyle whirled around, his face a mask of frustration and rage. "You're like a bad itch that won't go away," he snapped, raising a tranquilizer gun. Riley moved fast, grabbing a spinning bike discarded in the fray and hoisting it like a shield. The tranquilizer dart ricocheted off the metal frame and, with a powerful kick, Riley sent the bike rolling straight into Lyle's legs. The impact knocked Lyle off balance, sending him sprawling into a pile of licorice tea leaves. Captain Cluck, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. The fearless turkey launched himself onto Lyle's back, pecking at him with gleeful vengeance. "Enough!" Lyle bellowed, swatting futilely at the bird as he scrambled to his feet. His tranquilizer gun clattered to the ground, his confidence reduced to tattered remnants. Riley stepped forward, his stance steady and commanding.
"You've lost,"
he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Lyle glared, his eyes burning with venom even as his shoulders slumped in defeat. "This isn't over," he hissed. Limping to his truck, he muttered curses under his breath before speeding into the night, his tail lights fading into the fog. As the last of the hunters retreated, their cries fading into the woods, the clearing fell eerily silent. Smoke from extinguished campfires hung in the air, mingling with the faint scent of sage. The Roostkeeper stepped regally from its cage, shaking out its golden feathers as if shedding the battle itself. The bird stood tall, surveying the wreckage with a calm, almost majestic air. Hank limped toward Riley, clapping a weathered hand on his shoulder. His grin was weary but genuine. "You did good, kid," he said, his voice softer than usual. Riley exhaled, his shoulders finally relaxing.
"We all did,"
he replied, glancing around at the battered but standing militia. For the first time he felt truly at home, in his skin, in his role, and on this ranch. Marcy flopped onto a nearby log, pulling a stray feather from her hair. "If anyone asks, I'm officially retiring from cardio forever." Captain Cluck hopped onto Hank's knee, pecking affectionately at his hand, his glowing orb now dim but still intact. The group broke into laughter, their tension giving way to the absurdity of what they'd just endured. As Riley's gaze shifted to the Roostkeeper, standing tall against the clearing's hazy light, he allowed himself a rare, unguarded smile. They hadn't just protected a bird, they'd defended something far bigger than themselves. For now, that was enough. The last turkey ranch lay in a surreal, almost mystical calm. Moonlight cast silver ribbons across the battered landscape, illuminating overturned treadmills and broken decoy traps like remnants of an ancient battle. The sage and rosemary smoke curled through the air, clinging to the ruins with a spectral insistence, as if reluctant to leave. In the center of the yard, the Roostkeeper stood, its golden feathers catching the light in a way that seemed to defy logic. It strutted to the remnants of a wooden crate, hopped atop it like a king ascending his throne, and puffed out its chest. When it let loose a gobble, the sound wasn't just triumphant, it reverberated through the yard, shaking loose a few remaining leaves from the trees. And then something odd happened. The moonlight seemed to bend toward the bird, pooling around it like liquid silver. A low, soft hum filled the air, faint but unmistakable. The Roostkeeper spread its wings wide, and a glittering cascade of golden sparks flowed from its feathers, drifting upward like embers from a fire. Marcy froze mid-bite of her licorice pie. Is it supposed to glow?" she asked, pointing with her fork. Hank squinted at the bird. "That ain't just glowing," he muttered. "That's something else." The sparks spiraled upward, forming intricate patterns in the night sky. Feathers, stars, even what looked like a faint outline of the ranch itself. Then, with a flick of its wings, the Roostkeeper sent the radiant display cascading over the yard like an aurora. Wherever the sparks landed, something peculiar happened. A broken treadmill righted itself, its belt snapping taut as if ready for another battle. The sage and rosemary machine sputtered once, then let out a clean, steady stream of fragrant mist. Even Captain Cluck's dim decoy orb brightened, casting a warm, steady glow. The militia stood in stunned silence, watching as the bird tilted its head, surveying its handiwork. Then, with a small hop, it landed back in the dirt and began pecking at the ground as if nothing unusual had just occurred. "Well," Marcy said, breaking the silence, I guess we know why everyone's after that bird. Hank let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. Damn show-off, he muttered affectionately. Riley watched the scene unfold, his chest tightening with something between awe and pride. For the first time, it felt like the ranch wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The feast. The barnyard transformed into a wild, chaotic Thanksgiving banquet. A long, mismatched table stretched beneath strings of flickering Christmas lights and lanterns made from hollowed feed buckets. The feast mirrored the eclectic energy of the militia itself. A licorice-flavored pie shaped like a UFO oozed its sticky syrup onto the table, looking as though it might float away at any moment. Turkey-shaped veggie molds trembled as Captain Cluck inspected them suspiciously, as if they might be alive. A bowl of neon green mashed potatoes sat proudly at the center, labeled Marcy's Masterpiece. No one dared to touch it. Steaming mugs of cider made their rounds, the spicy aroma mingling with the faint scent of lingering rosemary. Captain Cluck flapped onto the table and began pecking at a garland made of sage and twinkling LED lights. Riley shooed him away with a laugh while Hank raised his mug high.
To the weirdest damn Thanksgiving this ranch has ever seen,
He declared, his voice cutting through the chatter. The militia roared with laughter, with pride, clinking their mugs together in chaotic unison. As the feast wound down, someone unearthed an old guitar from the barn. A hybrid with feathered wrists strummed a few hesitant chords before launching into a clumsy rendition of a turkey-themed folk song. Voices joined in, some loud and proud, others hopelessly off-key. Even the turkeys contributed, wandering between chairs and occasionally gobbling in harmony. Riley sat on the porch, his mug of cider warm against his palms. The ranch felt alive in a way he'd never experienced, not just a place, but a living, breathing community. The Roostkeeper stood near the table, its feathers still faintly glowing as it tilted its head toward the sky. Then, as if sensing its audience, it let out another resounding gobble. This one carried a different kind of magic. Overhead, the stars seemed to shimmer brighter, aligning for just a moment into the faint shape of a golden feather. The militia erupted into cheers, mugs raised high. "To you, Your Majesty," Marcy called, her voice loud and playful. The Roostkeeper gave a small hop, flaring its wings as if accepting their praise. Riley chuckled softly, the sound unguarded. For the first time, the ranch didn't just feel like a place to defend. It felt like home. Above, the stars returned to their usual scatter, but for those standing on the last turkey ranch that night, the magic lingered, bright and unyielding.
Turkeys had a man in place, and Captain Cluck led a chase with grace. From the treadmills mooring to the acre long, we turned the soul ranch into a battleground charm. Licorice pies and veggie mold pride. This ain't just a ranch, it's where we thrive. Oh, that is a story, crossing the dirt. Fighting for the fire, for all in this world. Roostkeeper struts golden feathers so bright, a beacon of hope in the cool moonlight. The hunters retreated, their tails to glow, while the turkeys and the hybrids stole the show. Fat as a fury, crossing the dirt. He's been fighting for the fire, for all it is worth. Through the chaos and laughter, we'll make our stand in the weirdest little ranch in the whole Dazzling on end. So here's to the fly, to the feather we made, to the glowing decoys and the cosmic display. Will the Roostkeeper's gobble our spirits soar, this wench is our home forevermore.
We are the Story Brothers, and we invite you to join us on an extraordinary journey into the world of storytelling and AI. Together, we'll delve into an endless sea of stories, ideas, and topics, pushing the boundaries of imagination with the power of generative AI. Our mission? To see just how far we can take these tales. Intrigued? If you like what you hear, please share our adventure. Got requests or feedback? Don't be a stranger. We'd love to hear from you. Cheers to new beginnings and endless possibilities.